Hello and welcome to the Capitola Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, November 19th, 2025. This is a special Planning Commission meeting to talk about the Capitola Mall. The meeting is open to the public with both in-person attendance at the City of Capitola Council Chambers, 420 Capitola Avenue, and remote viewing is also possible. Planning Commission staff are attending in person, and members of the public wanting to offer public comment need to be present. The public can live stream the meeting on the city's website, on YouTube, or on Zoom following the link on the meeting agenda. As always, this meeting is cablecast live on Spectrum Communications, Cable TV Channel 8, and AT&T Uverse Channel 99, and is being recorded to be rebroadcast on the following Mondays and Fridays at 1 p.m. on Spectrum Channel 71 and Spectrum Channel 25. A recording of the meeting will also be available on the city's website after the meeting. Our technician tonight is Brian Robinson. And as a reminder, please turn off your cell phones during the meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Here.
Commissioner Q?
Here.
Commissioner Welch? Vice Chair Christensen?
Here.
And Chair Esty?
Here. Now please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Additions and deletions to the agenda.
Yes, we had 2 comments for item 5A. There were emails earlier, and they were published.
Okay, thank you. Time for oral communications from the public. This allows members of the public to address the Planning Commission any consent item on tonight's agenda, which there are none, or any topic within the jurisdiction of the city that is not on the public hearing section of the agenda. Is there anybody in the public who would like to speak? You will be limited to up to 3 minutes, and please do not have a dialogue with the commission.
Hi, my name is Goran Klapic. I'm a former security guard of Zelda's on the beach. I worked the front door with George in the past. Back then, I was observing something when I met with Andrew Daly. He was the police chief back then, that there was some cocaine trafficking going on in the city of Capitola at that point. I know when I received threats back then, because I came forward with stuff like that. I did not care so much because I knew some people who served in the army like me, so I'm not concerned about my safety. But I'm just saying you have to be aware that things like that happen, and we fortunately have a very good police chief right now. Her name is Sarah Ryan. I consider her my friend. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other public comments on items not on the agenda?
Good evening. I just wanted to comment on, actually this was on the city council meeting agenda last week regarding a 100% affordable housing project that was proposed adjacent to Pono on Capitola Road. My understanding is that the city received an application from the developers, CRP, a little over a month ago, and that was for, I believe, a 43-unit, 100% affordable project. And they were seeking the city to support that project so that they could go and get disaster relief funding to help support the subsidy of a 43-unit project. The city chose not to take action on that project, and that means that the developers essentially has their hands tied and has to move forward with a ministerial project, which they're proposing to be 88 units. It's just, I think, very interesting that the city council chose not to take any action on a 43-unit project and instead, by default, is going to receive an 88-unit project. I happen to support either version, but I just think it's unfortunate that the city couldn't make up its mind to support any project at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, we'll go to item number 4, Planning Commission comments. First, any comments from the commissioners?
Apologies for being late.
No worries. No? Okay. And staff, any comments just before we start the meeting?
Yes, tomorrow night there is a town hall at New Brighton Middle School in the Performing Arts Center right out front. So 6 p.m. start. We're going to go over all the active projects that are occurring in the city right now and the financial outlook for the city as well. So hope you can attend, and we encourage those listening from home to attend as well. And it will be recorded, so it will be live. I don't think it'll be live tomorrow night, but later it can be watched on our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, item number 5, public hearings. Public hearings intended to provide an opportunity for public discussion of each item listed as a public hearing. The following procedure is the staff presentation, Planning Commission questions, public comment, Planning Commission deliberation, and decision. And the first item and only item tonight is Capitola Mall properties.
Okay, we're pulling up the slides on Zoom as well, so it'll just be a second. Okay, good evening, Planning Commission. Tonight, I'm happy to introduce you to our team of consultants who's been working on the Capitola Mall project. To the right of me is Eric Phillips. He works with BWS, our attorney office, and specializes in housing law. And also we have Ben Noble of Ben Noble Planning, who you're all familiar with, and Ryan Call is on the Zoom meeting this evening, and he's an architect that's also been working on our team. So in developing the current project of the zoning code amendments, which are related to the updates to the code, as well as a new chapter on objective standards. So next slide, please. There we go. So a little bit of background. We get a lot of questions of how we got here. And so just some background on some previous planning efforts. In 2011, there was the 41st Avenue and Mall revisioning plan that was adopted by the city. 2013, a full update of the general plan. And then in 2024, our housing element update, which you all, the majority of you participated in. Next slide, please. Some background on this. So after adopting the long-range planning documents, you always do your implementation through the zoning code. So back in 2010, we did a reduction to parking requirements and allowed mixed use in the community commercial and regional commercial zones. In 2018, we created a community benefit over the mall in which you could get a higher floor area ratio and additional height. The base height, I think, was 40 feet at the time, and you could go up to 50 for mall redevelopment. Then in 2018, we also we adopted a new regional commercial zoning district in which we allowed horizontal and vertical mixed use and decreased the parking requirement on the site. And in 2022, we adopted objective standards for multifamily and mixed use. And more recently, in 2024, we went through the first exercise of updating our zoning code to remove barriers to housing. So we did a lot of changes for the missing middle and creating incentives to combine lots, and just removed a lot and again decreased our parking and tried to streamline processes. So next slide, please. When we adopted our housing element in 2024, there are 2 programs that relate to the Capitola Mall, and those are programs 1.6 and 1.7. And as you'll see in these slides, it talks about facilitating a shopping center redevelopment, looking at the whole block, not just the properties owned by the primary owner of the mall, allowing heights up to 75 feet, redefining mall development to mean residential and retail commercial, excluding parking garages. That's a big incentive to take parking garages out of floor area ratio calculations, and then adopt objective standards to review a future project against. Next slide. So to date, our public involvement, we are on our third work session tonight on this item. Met twice in October and then this evening's meeting. We also had a community meeting at New Brighton Middle School on October 8th, and we had a stakeholder meeting on October 29th in which we invited all the other property owners on the mall site, and that was well attended. And then on December 4th, that will be our next Planning Commission meeting. And at that meeting, that will be the first full draft in which we will also have the objective standards. This has been a very quick timeline, and we were hoping to have the objective standards to you tonight, but it just wasn't feasible. So next slide, please. So quick introduction to what is an objective standard. It's a standard that takes out subjective judgment. It has clear and measurable rules that anyone reading the standard should understand exactly whether or not a project complies or does not comply with the standard. And it's really geared at like measurements of height, setbacks, design features, open space, landscaping, but very clear guidance. Next slide. Couple examples of this. A subjective example would be the new development must complement the neighborhood's architectural style. That's pretty vague. A developer wouldn't know what to come in with to complement the neighborhood's architectural style. Objectives standards example is a commercial building entryway must be recessed 5 feet from the front facade of a building. It's measurable. It's easy to understand. So that's what the big lift in this project is, the next step of the objective standards. Next slide. So tonight, we'll be going over the amendments to the existing zoning code chapters, and Ben's going to walk us through those. And then at our next meeting on December 4th, we'll bring forth the objective standards. It is our intention to take these all together as a packet when we are looking for a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council. We'd like the whole package to be recommended. So I apologize that we couldn't get you the objective standards tonight, but just didn't have enough time. So next, this is Ben Noble of Ben Noble Planning.
All right, thanks, Katie. So included in the packet tonight are amendments to 3 existing chapters in the zoning code. There's chapter 1724, which contains the standards that are specific to commercial and industrial zoning districts. And within that chapter is a new section that contains the majority of the new material for tonight. It's chapter 1724-035, which we've called Capitola Mall Redevelopment. There's also a few cleanup amendments to chapter 1782 and 1788, and some new terms and revised terms within the glossary. So focusing on the new section 1724-035, this is the new rules in the zoning code for Capitola Mall redevelopment. And they address development standards, land use regulations, fiscal impact analysis, and the permit application and review requirements for projects that include new residential uses on the Capitola Mall property. And our general approach with this material has been to satisfy the city's housing element obligations and to also comply with the various state housing laws that are relevant to Capitola Mall redevelopment. And we're really looking to incentivize the type of Capitola Mall redevelopment that the city wants to see as articulated in the general plan. So a Capitola Mall redevelopment project that's a pedestrian-friendly commercial destination with outdoor amenities for shoppers and families and public gathering places for people to meet and to gather. As I mentioned, an important part of this is complying with the city's housing element obligations. And in the housing element, the Capitola Mall property is identified as a site in the sites inventory and identifies a realistic unit capacity of 1,777 units. This is for the mall property overall, with an assumed density of 48 dwelling units per acre. And as discussed in the staff report, the proposed amendments that are before you tonight would accommodate these housing element obligations. Another important consideration is compliance with the California Housing Crisis Act, which among other requirements says that cities cannot reduce the existing residential development capacity on a property unless an alternative site is provided. And as discussed in the staff report, the proposed amendments, including the maximum density of 48 dwelling units per acre, is greater than the existing residential capacity and therefore is in compliance with the Housing Crisis Act. So here is a map that shows the Capitola Mall property, and in the purple are the Capitola Mall housing element sites. So these are the sites, these are the parcels where the city says it will accommodate additional residential housing to meet, in part, the city's regional housing needs allocation obligation. So in this area, the city is allowing a maximum of 48 dwelling units per acre, which would accommodate the 1,777 units. So also within the Capitola Mall property, there are the parcels that are owned by Merlone Geyer. There are 4 parcels in total, and the acreage is 22.26 acres. And so if a maximum density of 48 dwelling units per acre is applied, as assumed in the housing element, that would allow for 1,069 units on these parcels. So as Katie mentioned previously, in addition to the zoning code amendments before you tonight, the city is also preparing objective standards for new development projects that include a residential use, new residential use, as well as mixed use, and commercial development that's included as part of a residential project. And those standards will apply to all parcels within the Capitola Mall property, regardless of whether or not they are included in the housing element sites inventory. So again, this is the map that's showing the housing element sites. So in these areas will be the new development standards and land use regulations and permitting requirements that are part of the material that's before you tonight, and the objective design standards that you will have at your next meeting. So there are the parcels on the mall property that are not listed in the housing element. Those are shown here outside of the purple area with the star. And so after the city adopts the zoning code amendments in these areas, the existing regional commercial zone rules will continue to apply. So the existing development standards, the existing allowed uses and permit requirements, those will continue to apply in these areas outside of the housing element sites. But as I mentioned previously, the new objective standards for residential and mixed-use development will apply in those areas. Okay, so getting into some of the details of the Capitola Mall redevelopment amendments, we've defined 2 categories of developments, each which has their own unique requirements. The first type that we're calling the qualifying mixed-use development, and then the other type that we're calling the other residential or mixed-use projects. So the amendments define a qualifying mixed-use project, and those projects must include all of the following. So on-site residential development that meets the 20% affordable housing requirement as identified in the housing element, but that also includes a hotel with at least 85 rooms and 3,500 square feet of meeting space, as well as new commercial space as part of the project with a minimum floor area of 25,000 square feet. So in order to utilize the development standards, use regulations, and permit requirements of a qualifying mixed-use project, the project needs to include all of these elements. So other residential or mixed-use projects are projects that don't meet the criteria for a qualifying project, but that include a new residential use. And one thing that we need to revise within the proposed amendment is the language about the affordability requirement. So the 20% affordability requirement as identified in the housing element, that will also apply to an other residential project. What the draft says is that actually the city's existing inclusionary zoning ordinance would apply. That was an error and is a change that needs to be made to the draft, and which we will be incorporating when we review future drafts. Here is a table that is comparing the development standards that apply to a qualifying mixed-use project and an other project. And you can see that a lot of the standards are the same, such as a maximum floor area ratio of 2.0, parking, density, and setbacks. The main difference is with the allowed height on the property. And I have another slide that will go into this in more detail. The other big difference is with the amount of publicly accessible open space that must be included as part of the project. So here's a slide that shows the idea of a core area and a perimeter zone. So this concept identifies a perimeter zone that abuts the 41st Avenue, Clare Street, and Capitola Road. And within a distance from those property line frontages, there's a reduced height requirement. So within 75 feet of Capitola Road and 41st Avenue, and within 125 feet of Clare Street, the maximum height of a project is lower than in the core area. And for a qualifying mixed-use project, the maximum height in the perimeter zone is 65 feet, and the maximum height in the core area is 85 feet. For other projects that don't meet the qualifying mixed-use development criteria, the maximum height is 55 feet in the perimeter zone and 75 feet in the core area. For a qualifying mixed-use project, we do allow up to 85 feet for a hotel within the perimeter zone. Another difference between a qualifying mixed-use project and an other project is with the amount of publicly accessible open space. So for a qualifying mixed-use project, the maximum amount is, or the minimum required amount is 2.5% of the total site area. For other projects, the minimum amount is 5% of the site area. And then so as I mentioned previously, other standards for residential projects within the mall area are the same for both qualifying projects and other projects. So as required by the housing element, the city would allow a floor area ratio of up to 2.0 with garages, with structured parking and hotels excluded from that calculation. And so the draft as it currently exists right now says that the parking shall be as required by Chapter 1776. there's a minimum density of 20 dwelling units per acre, which is a requirement of state housing laws, and a maximum density of 48 dwelling units per acre, which is the density that's assumed in the housing element to accommodate the units obligated under the city's RENA allocation. So in addition to those development standards, the amendments also include some changes to the land use regulations, or which land uses are permitted and what type of permit is required. So for a qualifying mixed-use project, there are a number of commercial uses which would be a P permitted use. That includes hotels, retails, restaurants, and cultural institutions. And the idea is that the city wants to sort of streamline the establishment of these uses, as well as changes to uses in existing space in the future. And then also, as required under state law, the city does need to allow for residential-only development. So that is a option that's available. The goal with the qualifying mixed-use project is to incentivize a mixed-use redevelopment project consistent with the vision that the city has for the property. And so, as I mentioned previously, state law also requires a minimum density for the housing element sites of 20 dwelling units per acre, and a minimum 50% of the floor area to be residential as part of a mixed-use project. These are all requirements of state housing element law because of the nature of the sites identified on the mall property. So the zoning code amendments also include a section on fiscal impact analysis. And a fiscal impact analysis would be required for any project with new residential uses. And this fiscal impact analysis would identify the incremental fiscal impact of the proposed project and the net impact on the city's general fund and special funds. So the applicant would submit a fiscal impact analysis prepared by a qualified economist, and the city would then peer review this fiscal impact analysis with its own economic consultant. Okay, so the last part of the new section in the zoning code is the permit application and review. And so this establishes essentially a three-step process. The first step would be the applicant hosting a community meeting, and this would need to occur before the city deems the application complete. The next step, after the application is deemed complete and city staff has completed its analysis, would be for the Planning Commission to hold a notice public hearing to review the application and to make a recommendation to the City Council. And ultimately, the final step, the third step, would be for the City Council to make a decision and to take action on the application. Okay, so that's a summary of the materials that are before you tonight as part of these amendments. And as Katie mentioned, our initial intention was to have the objective design standards for you to review tonight along with this material. We didn't quite get there. We didn't want to put anything out prematurely. So that material will be available for you at your next meeting, at which you'll have the opportunity to review that alongside this material tonight that you've already had an opportunity to review and comment on. And then once the Planning Commission has made a recommendation on all of this material, the next step will be a City Council hearing that we're expecting to happen in 2026, either in January or in February. So staff's recommendation tonight is for the Planning Commission to receive public comment on this preliminary draft of the amendments and to provide direction to staff on any requested changes to these draft amendments, which we can then incorporate into the material, which you'll see again at your next meeting alongside the objective design standards. So with that, that concludes staff presentation.
Okay, thank you. So before we get to public comment, planning commissioners, you have a chance to ask questions of staff, including Ben. Anybody want to go first? No? Okay, I got a few questions. Go back, the parcels, the two parcels that are excluded from the Capitola Mall development zone, or whatever we're calling it, what's the rationale for leaving them in the existing CR zone? Is there some sort of grandfather clause associated with those properties?
So those were not included in the housing elements.
Right, I know
inventory.
that, but I don't remember why we didn't include them.
It was at the request of the mall owner, Merlone Geyer Partners. So,
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we met their request, and we just excluded them.
And the reason for it, I know with Kohl's, there's a long-term lease there.
Yeah, I
So that's the purpose for Kohl's. And Jameis William is here tonight from Malone Geyer Partners. I don't really know much about the parcel that is around Target or how to explain that, if you'd like to maybe provide insight on that parcel.
Yeah, that's the strange one, because it's got the food court in it.
I'm honestly confused as well. This predates me and my involvement on the project. If I had it my way, they wouldn't be carved out. Kohl's is currently on a long-term lease, like you said, and we see these types of businesses come and go, though. Let's just say 10 years from now, Kohl's no longer in existence and we can't backfill the space, and it makes sense to put housing there. So the Target, it's an odd shaped parcel. It is where the food court is. It's also the loading dock access to and from Target, and there's a no build kind of easement with Target. So that's why that one is potentially carved out. Again, we don't own the Target parcel, so if Target were to go away or we were to acquire that parcel down the road, it could be developed. But having it zoned for the use is, as long as what's currently operating isn't precluded from operating there, I don't see a reason why carve out.
Okay, thank you. A little bit odd. Let's see, I had a question.
Curiosity, I have a quick question if you.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Go ahead.
Just a little more clarification, maybe, Ben, on this 100% residential development component that could be brought into play, I guess. My understanding, I guess it's required under their housing element law, but I don't know when we learned about that or how that comes into play. And I guess my question really is, what are the criteria around that? I understand that the dwelling unit per acre would be reduced to 20, is that correct?
Well, yes, so you have a couple of layers of questions there. So the first one I'll handle, and then Ben can take us through the development standards piece of it. Excuse me. But the issue is actually, there's a relatively recent Court of Appeal case just from the last few months based out of Southern California, which made even HCD's interpretation of commercial zoning and sites that are available to meet your RENA capacity for the housing element a little bit more strict. So it's a state law. It's been in the housing element statute, but I think that the interpretation has been sharpened over the last few months due to the Court of Appeal decision. But in short, there is a requirement in order for these commercially designated parcels to count as available for housing and get credit for them in the housing element through the rezoning. They have to allow for mixed-use development, but mandate that if it's a mixed-use development, at least 50% of the floor area be made available as a residential use. They have to make sure that there's at least 20 dwelling units per acre. The maximum has to track with what we committed to in the housing element. And then the third piece is that because we are accommodating our RENA on mixed-use development sites, more than 50% of our RENA is being accommodated on mixed-use development sites. the zoning has to give the developer the option of developing a 100% residential development on those sites in order for it to continue to count towards our RENA credit. So that's why the zoning code has the kind of bifurcated regulatory scheme. It does allow for this 100% residential development to meet the minimum criteria that the housing element law sets forth, but because we all know and anticipate that the mixed use development is preferable, and what the developer intends and what the city hopes to see happen here, the larger increase in development standards is associated with a mixed use development project. So the developer would then have the option of using development standards that still facilitate development that are consistent with the housing element goals at a 100% residential development product type. But if they opt into delivering that mixed use project, they'll get additional benefits, additional height, more generous floor area ratio calculations, the reduced open space. And our hope is that that will incentivize the developer, even though they have the option to do 100% residential development, create sufficient incentive that we see the mixed use project.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm not sure that really clarified everything that I was looking at, but I guess my question would be, I guess it's retroactive really, is we have 80 sites listed in our housing element with 2,511 sites. We could have easily have made this not been that big of a priority, I think, in the process, had we known that. Is it something we knew ahead of time going in, or is this something new that came in that said they can be 100% if it's, that part of our housing element plan as far as meeting our affordable housing? I guess what I'm trying to get to is why, is there a point where, because honestly, I don't know what Malone Geyer's intent is yet, to this point. We know they want some housing, they wanted this 48 units per acre, and so we're accommodating those ways, I guess, but when it comes to looking out for the city's interest of being able to provide for an income or tax revenue to the city, is that something that would be eliminated completely with the 100% housing, or can we still get up to 50% of that floor space with retail?
Well, yeah, so it's up to then what the market and the developer would be able to provide. That if the zoning has to give the option of having the 100% residential development, but that's not mandatory that the developer build that. And so that if the market supports a mixed use project, the commercial, either at the minimum levels that are necessary to qualify for that qualified mixed use project, or even more than that, if that's what the market support, that certainly the code would accommodate that as well.
I'd like to do a follow-up question on that. So regarding the slide about the 85 rooms for the hotel and the conference center, how is that determined initially? And it really feeds in kind of like the feasibility of this project, like what kind of models sort of show that the city is actually profitable on there?
Yeah, so I think part of, we'll pull up the slide in a second, but part of where that came from is looking at what the market for hotels in the region would be, wanting to have something that would be achievable and deliverable so that this remains a financially feasible and realistic option for the developer to opt into while still leaving the flexibility for a larger project. Certainly if the market would support a larger hotel or more than one hotel option here, the zoning would accommodate that, and the city would certainly encourage that level of development. But we wanted to create something that would be feasible and supportable within the market here, and that would not turn off a developer from using the qualifying mixed-use project incentive and inadvertently pushing them towards a residential-only project if the requirement were too high.
Thank you. And then just for my point of clarification, when we're looking at kind of the financial priority of like capture rate of tax revenue between sales tax revenue, property tax revenue, and TOT, can you just help me understand which one, how that works out?
Sure, I don't know, do you?
Sure. So in terms of the comparison between a hotel and commercial on the property, a hotel, we take in a lot more direct taxes to the city. It goes directly to the city, where retail is a fraction of the financial benefit to the city. So per square foot, or there's a much higher financial benefit of a hotel to the city in order to pay for the expenses associated with the development over commercial.
Okay, regarding that same slide, the 25,000 square foot allocation for commercial, by my calculations, right now, Berlone-Geyer has about 189,000 square feet of commercial, what I would call commercial space, which is everything, the Ulta Beauty store and all those stores, the food court, and unfortunately the corridors of the mall, but all of that is about 180,000 square feet. And yet we're asking them to, or we're giving them lenience, so to speak, to go down to 25,000 square feet, which I assume also includes any, Chili's is in my numbers. That assumes restaurants as well, right? Seems relatively low compared to where we are today, kind of following up on Mr. Q's question.
That is correct. Regarding the numbers, I think your number doesn't include the Kohl's. So
No,
I
it doesn't
think,
include
yeah.
those.
So if you were to look at the spine of the mall and the Sears space, I think you're correct in those numbers. In some of our conversations about new commercial coming into this spot, I don't know if Jameis would like to speak to this, but the kind of quality of the different restaurant types that are fast casual that really do, they have a stronger tax benefit at the end through the commercial, but yeah. So maybe giving a better understanding of what that 25,000 could look like.
I think the conversation last time was about there's the sales tax revenue side of commercial retail, which we did some math on another project, and it's not apples to apples because the sales tax trickle down is different all over, but a 95 key hotel was the equivalent of about 130,000 square feet of commercial retail if it was doing like $350 or $400 a foot in sales. That's really healthy retail. If it's doing $100 or $150 a foot in sales, it could be twice that much square footage of retail. So in our mall currently, the sales volumes are closer to like $100, $150 a foot on the shops. And we own 373,000 square feet, including the 110,000 square foot vacant Sears, the 74,000 square foot Kohl's, and then the mall's 181,000 feet. So 2 questions. There's the sales tax generating side, which is where the hotel is way more bang for your land area buck, so to speak, versus retail, which requires significant parking, gobbles up a lot of land area. And so I think my recollection from the conversation about the 25,000 square feet was related to the placemaking aspect of the retail. And our experience with large scale mixed use projects is that half an acre to an acre is kind of the ideal, like good feeling amount of space, which then you surround that with retail and you get to 25,000 square feet. So if there's a hotel plus there's that half acre to an acre surrounded by shops and restaurants, from a sales tax revenue perspective, you're doing better than you would with a ton of retail square footage. And then you're creating like a nucleus of energy that just feels a lot better in a mixed use project.
Has Berlone-Geyer done hotels on their projects like this?
We have, I'm doing hotels and other projects.
Is that an attractive asset for you here? Is that something you would do?
Each market is very different from a demand perspective for hotels. We haven't gone so far as to, negotiate a transaction with a hotel group. Obviously, the hotels are doing fairly well here, but it's to be determined. We haven't really dug into the market yet on how deep the demand is for the hotels. But I would agree. I mean, you don't want to set the bar too high, and then if the demand isn't there, it's difficult to achieve.
Another question just came to mind. The transit center, does that have any sort of special easement, or how is that done on this mall?
It does. Metro has an easement over the mall, or over the transit center. And so any future redevelopment of the mall, if they want to move that, that would be a negotiation with the other property owners on the mall site.
We don't have to predefine that area or anything. That's the Metro, Cruz, and the.
Yep, the board would approve. I know a lot of work went into that in the last, about a decade ago. And when the previous project came in 2019, there was an agreement of where that would, it had support for moving the Metro station. So, but it is something that they would have to work out.
And we might want to also just highlight that because there is that land that's dedicated for that, currently, although it's a constraint that could be removed in the future, it was not factored into the development capacity as part of the housing element or the meeting the development capacity with our 48 dwelling unit per acre standard now. So I know there was a public comment in written form about that, but the development assumptions and the housing element already reduce the development potential to account for that transit center.
Right, but if if they manage to get up to a rate of 15 buses per minute or whatever, right, then we are obligated to have different rules within a certain radius of that transit center. I guess that's the essence of my question. Do we have to account for that now, or we don't? It isn't that way now. So is that kind of a catch-22?
It became a high frequency stop.
Right.
There would be a decrease in the required amount of parking on the site because it would be for within a quarter mile of a high frequency transit stop, there's allowances for lower parking standards.
Right. So, but we don't have to account for any of that today.
Not today. It does not. It's not considered a high frequency stop today.
And if it were to change in the future, the state laws that preempt enforcement of parking regulations do that regardless of what the code says. So you can have your default standards that apply based on current conditions. If those conditions change and a state law is triggered by that, the state law rule would apply regardless of what you have in the zoning code. So you don't need to specifically code for that future change that could lead to a state law preemption.
I have a question that this may be a little random, but within the proposal for affordable and market rate units, are they, I don't know if this was addressed, but is it, how are the affordable units distributed into each building? Is it, or how do we control that, or do we have any projected measures to control that?
So it's not specified. At this point, we don't have a specific development proposal in front of us. So I think that the general preference is to have units be distributed, though in a large scale project like this, often it's common to partner with 100% affordable housing developer to maybe get deeper levels of affordability or higher unit count. And so if there is a specific proposal like that, then we can evaluate that at that time.
I mean, is there, you specialize in housing. In your experience, has there been, where they silo the affordable rate units and then they silo the market rate units, and they have different services for each? And how does that really impact the community and the quality of life for each occupant?
Yeah, so thank you. It's a thoughtful question. There definitely are. So there's fair housing considerations with how you design your housing. You do want to have equitable levels of service and access to amenities throughout the project. Having said that, even while accomplishing those goals, it is common in large-scale redevelopment projects for market rate developers to partner with developers that specialize in delivering affordable housing so that you can leverage financing incentives and deliver a higher number and deeper levels of affordability. So that model is certainly common in other large-scale redevelopment efforts and can be appropriate. But until we have a specific development proposal in front of us, it's hard to say specifically.
I guess my concern is just that if we were tasked with providing objective standards at this stage, if that's something that we want to provide, or is that not a concern for anybody?
Yeah, so I don't know if that's something that is specifically going to be addressed in the objective standards. So that's feedback that we can consider as that's being further developed. And then, yeah, there'll be a discussion about we want to balance the application of standards in a way that facilitates the feasibility of the development. So we want to make sure that we preclude flexibility in how we meet the standards too.
Thank you.
I guess to follow up on that, we saw a document today that showed, I guess, Malone are asking for exclusive buildings that were low to moderate income, correct? So you assume just by their ask that they would prefer to have a segmentation of buildings.
And yeah, so it becomes then I think a policy question for the city is whether you want to write that in up front the way that Marlon Geyer was asking for, or whether we evaluate it to make sure, again, in the context of a specific development application, because I think in those types of proposals, the underlying facts make quite a difference about who the development group is, what the time frame expected is to be able to finance and deliver the affordable housing. Like I said, there can be a lot of benefits from that model, but also want to make sure that it's implemented with the right checks and balances.
So as a policy decision, though, your suggestion is to stay flexible. Don't adopt that language and allow the city council or the planning commission to determine that when the project comes through the door. Is that your recommendation?
Well, so right now we don't have a standard that states you need to disperse the housing throughout a housing project or stand alone. A lot of when we've had subdivision applications or new housing projects that have come in that are market rate, that's when you'll see like Terra Court behind Osh. Of 13 units, there's one affordable unit in that development. And that's what you'll see in Capitola. But we haven't had a large scale development like this. The other type of development we see is a standalone affordable housing development, which have been very successful. We've got the one on Bay Avenue. The Bluffs was just finished on Capitola Road. There's examples of those in which the people living in the affordable units, usually there's another purpose there with senior housing within the Bay Avenue example, and providing other services other than just providing housing. But within our inclusionary housing ordinance right now, it is not specified. So we do have an allowance that at the time of a development, you're allowed to dedicate land. And so under that model, that's really suggesting a standalone affordable project, but it's not really clear of a preference one way or the other. The code that we've drafted to date that you're considering tonight also does not include a preference. So that is something that you could talk about and let us know if you think that should be included. But that was the preference of Merlot and Geyer in their letter, was to enable the standalone affordable. And I think it does help a project pencil out better, but then there's that other discussion of whether or not you want to, if integrating into all the different housing is, yeah. So
Can we ask why?
This is very standard. In a large scale project, to partner with an affordable group. I did affordable housing development for 2 years out of grad school. It was my first gig, and the efficiencies of financing and the benefits of catering the programming of the space. You have to partner with a nonprofit. It's all geared towards really using that as a stepping stone or meeting those people wherever they are in life. And there's programs that are there to help them, to advance. And we could bring in, plenty of people from the affordable housing industry to speak to the benefits of having a standalone affordable building. So that's why we included it. We just wanted to make sure that there was clarity in there. We think there's benefits in having that clarity and cleaning that up as opposed to the ambiguity. But I lived in affordable housing while I was in grad school and early on in my career while my wife was working. And, they're wonderful examples of low-income housing tax credit projects that you can have them standing right next to a market rate project. You wouldn't know the difference. And so, I think you'd get a very large affordable housing lobby coming in and speaking in support of that if it became, a topic of contention or concern that people would feel less than because they were living next to a market rate. It's just, that's not the case. So.
I guess we don't need to codify it, though. They could come to us with a proposal and say, we'd like to make this building C low to moderate and deal with it then.
Correct.
Is that advantageous to us in terms of just having the flexibility?
I think so. I think it's advantageous to see, to give Malone Geyer the opportunity to bring something forward. And I don't know that you could say no to it, though, if it was something you really weren't for. So this is the time that if you really do want an integrated project, that's why you would have that standard.
Thank you.
And you could make the standard, any development over 500 units could have a standalone building. You can make it that specific.
Yes, you could make a threshold with the standard. Yep.
Very many sites over 500.
Another question I have is with the financial impact analysis, there's no specific language that talks around like sustained cost to the city, right? Or like what revenue would look like in different types of functions of retail in there. Is there? Is it just says financial impact analysis in general?
There are parameters for what the analysis is supposed to look at, how that study would be prepared.
Oh, we could be more specific in the language.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Currently, we ask for the incremental impact of the project, and then also the overall impact to the city's finances. So it's kind of looking at two things, not just their project, but also the city's finances.
Great. Thank you for that. My second question is, any conversations around phasing of the development of this project yet?
So when we put together this ordinance, we'll definitely have to have a submittal list of required submittal documents. And we can build phasing requirement into the actual ordinance itself. We don't have that in now, but I think phasing as well as the fiscal analysis will be a requirement of any application. So we really want to know, especially if there's a land dedication for affordable housing, to understand when will that affordable housing, one of those, or a qualified project, when will the hotel be built? When will the affordable housing be built? Because we want to make sure it's balanced. So,
thank you.
But back to the FIA, we cannot use it as any kind of standard to approve or disapprove a project legally, right? It's just a FYI to the city.
That's the way it's drafted right now, because we want to be mindful of two things: not imposing a standard that would potentially make the redevelopment or housing development infeasible, and not creating a standard that was not objective as a basis to deny the project. Because then the Housing Accountability Act and other housing laws say that if you're going to deny or condition a project, it has to be based on an objective standard. And we think that the way that the ordinance is written, the preparation of the fiscal study and that creating that information is objective, but it is not something that the way it's drafted right now would be used to as a basis to deny the project or condition it in a way that would make it infeasible.
And
How does the city then, if they come to us with a project of 1,500 units and very little retail and no hotel or an unsuccessful hotel, how does the city protect itself from being overwhelmed with the costs and underwhelmed with the revenue that comes from it? In other words, break the city or break the budget. Is there a way to to protect the city?
Well, I guess part of the hope is that the fiscal impact analysis would help shape the overall land use proposal and inform all parties in a way that the development will go forward so that it doesn't put the rest of the city out of business. Obviously, hope is not a strategy. That's not the only thing that we would want to rely on. But there could be other mechanisms, like if the land use mix was such that it didn't fully support ongoing fiscal stability, we could look at things like a CFD or other financing tools to help provide infrastructure and services without undermining the city's general fund. But those types of tools will be better informed by the fiscal analysis, which is part of why we want that provided in connection with the application.
And just to follow up that, outside of the FIA, we can still do like traffic impact studies to discuss how that would impact. We can do impact fees if needed, if we see necessary, those type of things. Is that true?
Yeah, provided that they're based on adopted objective standards that are in effect when the application is submitted.
One last pretty simple question. This is probably for Ryan, who's been silent through all this, but the NIMBY letter says our math is wrong and we can't execute at 48 dwelling units per acre and get the RENA numbers we want because of all the other restrictions we have on the property. Is that a correct statement in your view?
Yeah, I feel pretty good about the math that we calculated. And essentially what we did is I've got, a lot of prototypical hotel plans, and I looked at the acreage required for basically 140 room home to suites. And then I took about an acre of open space, which, pulled that out of there. So 3 acres plus another acre. And then Ben has written some great, the beginnings of some great standards that say your max block length is about 450 feet. So based on that, I know we could have a couple roads that traverse the site east-west and a couple that would traverse the site north-south. So I assume a right-of-way of 70 feet, subtract that out. And then I can I used a higher number for the retail just as kind of a safety factor. So 40,000 for that. And then some square footages, assuming that you have to get trucks behind some of the retail. So some square footage for that. And then you get what's left for the land and to put housing on. And so then we have, essentially there's ways you can take a gross square footage of a housing footprint and an efficiency factor, and I use 75% because I'm assuming you'd likely see a wrapped housing product, which is a little less efficient but much more economical to build. So I did all these things and assumed some criteria such as 5 stories and 2 spaces per car. And it's not that this would be the end product, but there's safety factors built into this. And we were actually able to exceed the 48 units per acre, keeping Kohl's in place, keeping Macy's and Target in place, having the 40,000 square feet of retail, Bank of America, all those things stay in place, a surface parked hotel. And so I felt pretty good about the numbers that we came up with. There's always many different ways to do one of these plans and get the numbers and calculations out. But I think we built in safety factors to the math so that I think somebody could tighten things up and maybe get more units. But this was, we wanted to make sure that we could at least meet that 48 units per acre. And so that was our prerogative for, it's about excluding the 2 housing element parcels that were not included. Excluding the 2 parcels that were not included in the housing element, which is 26 acres. We were able to hit our target and exceed our target a little bit for the 48 units per acre.
One other point to complement what was just explained there was that it said in the letter that you referenced that the current CR zoning allows unlimited residential density, but I think that it's more accurate to say that although there's not a dwelling unit per acre standard, it's not unlimited density. The density is limited by your floor area, by your open space standards, by your height. And those are things that are all being relaxed and increased in connection with this rezoning. The ability to make much larger building forms is going to increase the residential development capacity up to that 40 dwelling units per acre that was identified in the housing element. I think if the 48 dwelling unit per acre estimate in the housing element were achievable under the current development standards, we wouldn't have to be updating the development standards. We need to loosen those development standards to increase the residential development capacity to bring it up to that 40 dwelling unit per acre standard. So that's the part of the process that we're doing now, is to, again, increase the height, change how FAR is calculated, and increase the development potential to increase the residential development capacity here at the moment.
Katie, can you talk to this idea of the Kohl's and the Target parking lot pieces, those 2 that will remain zoned as commercial, I assume? Is there any reason we don't codify if Kohl's lease is broken or they cease to exist as a business, they automatically convert to the current zoning we have for the parcels around it?
I think under that scenario, if, say, Kohl's lease was broken, at that point, MGP could come to us and say, you know, we would like to be included in your housing element, and we would like to be included in the zoning, and we would be open to that. So it's something the Planning Commission and City Council would consider. So, but at this time, I could see them coming in at a later housing element. Your housing element has an 8-year cycle. So if the Kohl's were in 8 years to only have another year of its lease, and Merlot Geyer Partners was open to the idea of adding it into that zone, the zoning incentives as well as the housing element, I think that's something we would definitely consider.
Yeah, I think that last point is important to keep in mind, is that in part, they weren't included in the current housing element cycle because of the development constraints that those specific contractual obligations impose on those parcels in particular. If those were removed in the future, then those could become housing development opportunity sites. And yeah, I guess the good news is that there's another housing element update right around the corner. So if those development constraints are removed, that will create another good housing opportunity site there.
If they were to be included, how would our objective standards stretch across those parcels because as it's distributed now, we have, these stringent or, standards put on this larger parcel. If it was a smaller, like Macy's, for example, or Kohl's, that the commercial requirement as opposed to the, applicability of all this stuff kind of thing distilled down to that smaller parcel.
So that has been something that's really important to us as we're moving forward with these objective standards. they're not just standards about the design of buildings, they're the standards for the streets, the sidewalks, the trees, how the pieces all fit together. So within the mall, within the zoning code update, we're suggesting that the objective standards apply to all parcels. So in the event that Merlone Geyer wanted to, I think they have a pad out in front of Kohl's where they could do a drive-through. So if they decided to opt to develop that pad, it would have to be in alignment with the objective standards that are being produced today. So it's really all about making this a functioning neighborhood and a great experience as a pedestrian, cyclist, or within a car, and how the residents will move through the space and visitors will move through the space. And the standards will apply to all properties. So that was one thing we didn't want to separate out because it would be really awkward to have different standards for within the same block. Thank you.
So I keep going around like the finances and the feasibility of the projects and the numbers and everything. So I like to look at all the different tools that we have in our toolbox to make this a successful project. How would something like a local density bonus work and affect this project? And has there been conversation around it yet?
I guess, do you have a specific idea? So a local, in some ways, the qualifying mixed use project works a little bit like a local density bonus in that we're allowing for additional development capacity, an additional height, reduced open space requirements in exchange for certain kind of priority uses being incorporated. So you could look to add other incentives to that suite to make that those desirable uses even more desirable. If you're looking specifically in the affordable housing context, I have worked with other jurisdictions to create local density bonus programs that either complement the state program or can be presented as an alternative to the state program to make sure that you're not undermining the state's goals in bonuses that are awarded to the developer. Typically, those have to allow for greater development potential than you could get under the state program if you want it to function as a pure alternative to the state's program. You have to maintain the same minimum amount of affordability and award greater density bonuses. If, however, you want it structured more like the incentive program that we have here, there's certainly other incentives that I'm sure either you could think of or Merlone Geyer could suggest that would make those preferred priority uses more feasible or more desirable.
Does get the question, James. How many times has Merlone Geyer executed on density bonuses in their last 5 projects or 6 projects? Have you used them every time?
I'll just, so people can hear the response on the mic, the answer was just once.
Okay, commissioners, any other questions for staff? Okay, now we've had a patient public quorum out there, so I'm sure many of you want to come up and have some comments. So we'll open it up to the public. You'll have 3 minutes and it'll be a one-way conversation. Thank you.
Excuse me. Good evening, members. I'm Ralph Sonnenfeld with Santa Cruz MP. We sent a letter which you've been asking some questions about yesterday evening. Before I get to that, I just wanted to say, in general, we support some of the approaches that the staff has recommended in terms of, the heights for the project and the interpretation of the housing element law requirements with regard to retail uses. And before I get into the letter, I also wanted to address the question about 100% affordable uses. Affordable housing typically costs more to build than is able to be collected in rent on each of the units. So that subsidy has to come from somewhere. And a very common way to subsidize affordable housing is through programs like the low-income housing tax credit. Many of those programs, most of those programs require the buildings to be 100% affordable. So if the city wants to see deeper levels of affordability and more flexibility with its affordable housing options, it's really good to allow a project like this to have a 100% affordable housing component that isn't necessarily integrated into the market rate units or into a market rate building. To ask the question about the 48 unit or 48 dwelling unit per acre density requirement, we're confused as to why this is being proposed as a new development limit. It doesn't really seem like there's a public benefit to explicitly limiting the number of families per acre that can live in a mall redevelopment project. But beyond that, there are legal questions. The housing element says that its realistic capacity is 48 units per acre on the mall sites. But there's no legal limit to the number of units per acre. So I think this raises an interesting question of if there's a new zoning standard that says that it's 48 units per acre, but the land use element of the general plan and the housing element of the general plan don't have a unit per acre limit. That's an inconsistency between the zoning and the general plan. And in that case, the general plan trumps the zoning. So I just don't see the benefit to doing that. Additionally, I also wanted to comment, it's very strange that we're talking about the mall, but then we're also looking at doing potentially a local coastal plan amendment in order to enact new objective standards in the mixed use visitor area in the coastal zone in the village, which doesn't seem like it has anything to do with the mall. So just confused about why we're even talking about that.
Okay.
What's proposed.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Alvarez. I'm a field representative of the Carpenters Local 646 in Marina. As this project moves forward, I want to point something out that is already on Capitola housing element. Under policy 2.5 affordable housing development, the city encourages developers and contractors to do a few key things. Look at hire local workers, hire from support apprenticeship programs, invest in labor compliance resources, and make sure these workers earn living wage. This isn't new language. It's already adopted in policy, and it sets important expectation that development in Capitola should support the community not just through housing, but through strong labor standards and real workforce opportunities. So today I'm simply asking that as this project moves forward, the city make sure the developer and contractors follows through those expectations, sticking to the policy 2.5 that lays out will improve the quality of the work, support local workers, and keep the commitments that the city already made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Janine Roth. I'm also with Santa Cruz EMB. I wanted to touch on some of the other aspects of our letter because, first of all, I want to thank staff, and I would like to thank everyone for the discussion, your great questions, which brought out some wonderful clarifications. I appreciate that very much. Would like to touch on some of the other things because I think that part of what your opportunity tonight is to tighten the language that's in front of you and to have that language be tight, consistent with the clarifications that we all received tonight. Clearly, we had some questions about the language that we saw. We received some clarifications. And so I ask that you further tighten the language. So for instance, if the financial impact analysis is a requirement and not a basis for approving the project, then the language shouldn't be that you consider the findings of the FIA when reviewing and acting upon the proposed development project. That's an example of some language tightening that I think would go a long way. Also heard that the community meetings would be added to the application checklist. That's really terrific. And perhaps the council can provide some clarity on how that would also comply with the Permit Streamlining Act and the 30-day completeness review period. There's also the fact that as you're talking about affordable housing projects separate or part of this project, that the review of the overall project still talks about it coming to the Planning Commission and then going to the City Council. And a very big surprise to public hearings and to bodies, elected bodies, is that sometimes there isn't the opportunity to truly deny a project without significant data. And so I think that the language needs to include that state law may make some projects eligible for ministerial approval, or that pathway is as, that there may be some things that state law where it changes that pathway. And then Rafa was mentioning at the end, you did a strike through for the objective standards to apply to the mixed use village and industrial zones. And that's a real concern because that does suggest a coastal commission review. And so I would ask that you ask for clarification about that. Finally, transit. Really glad that transit came up tonight. And I noticed that the incentive in 1788 for any transit infrastructure was removed. Confused about why that is. Also, just to remind you that one of your commitments in the housing element is to work with AMBAG to make the metro stop at Capitola Mall a high-quality transit stop. So transit needs to be discussed a little bit more as well. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to provide some clarifications to our letter and some of the things that we mentioned. It was already discussed, the objective design standards and where those are at. I understand it's a big lift, so just helpful to get some clarity on the timing. We're hopeful that some defined dates for city council meetings and upcoming meetings can be reestablished. I know that there was kind of a good timeline. We've been anxious for these regulations related to our property to come together for some time, and we're willing to continue to stay engaged. It'd be good to know, be back on a schedule. We mentioned in our letter this concept of aggregation of standards. Even Mr. Call who's chiming in, the architect talked about a 5-story wrap building. A 5-story wrap building isn't built at 48 dwelling units to the acre. It's typically 80 units to the acre or more. And the concept we have here is just making sure that there's language that, there will be surface parking lots that will remain on our property that we can't build on, but being able to use that density and put it into a multifamily building that is financially feasible is what that concept was related to. So we had some recommended language to incorporate that I think would be really helpful. We already talked about the standalone affordable building. I included some updated data related to the parking requirements. I know at the last meeting, I think I did a poor job of articulating kind of what our recommendation was because it implied a unit mix. So we did a bit more diving into the market and provided some recommendations that you can think about for the objective design standards for minimum parking requirements for multifamily. And then there was also something that we just picked up on related to the height projections only applying to the qualifying mixed-use projects, when the reality is those types of projections for elevators or architectural design elements, those are applicable to both 55-story and 85 or 55-foot and 85-foot buildings. And then clarifying that it's not just related to 15% along a frontage, just because of the way buildings are designed, right? So I just thought I'd point out those things. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, please?
Good evening. This is Terry Thomas. I'm a Capitola resident. I have some concerns I'll just kind of list them. Any proposed mall development must be of mixed use, not residential only. And then if parking spaces, if they're only allowing a half a parking space per unit, it doesn't really make sense. And how will the spaces for customers and employees be provided? And will residents be using them? My main concern is about height restrictions. I think 6 stories is plenty big. Any tall buildings should be set back into the interior of the development and away from street sidewalks. I'm concerned about perimeter zoning because it should include a setback with no building along the sidewalk. And if they're like, I've been in places where buildings are right on the sidewalk and they're claustrophobic to the people that have to pass by them. So you need to have some space between the sidewalk and the buildings. And the higher the building, the more interior they should be. I was wondering if the fiscal impact include tax repercussions. And I'm also concerned that doesn't all the rezoning that we just did mean that we don't need 1,777 units anymore? And if so, can we back off on some of the other zoning that we've already imposed upon other parcels in town? Because we already exceed by far the most other jurisdictions in the requirements for housing here in Capitola, probably because it's next to a beach and people can make more money developing this area than they can a place that's not next to the ocean. Thank you. Thank you for going through all of this. I'm glad I'm not up there anymore.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, let's bring it back for deliberation. I think we need to do this in parts. So the real key to this is Chapter 1724-035, Capitola Mall redevelopment. If we could bring up, let's talk about that, what was just raised, the perimeter zone and the definition of core and perimeter. And I think we had a slide on that. Want to go through the numbers with everybody first, and then we can talk about other elements of the changes here. That one. Okay. So here, the proposal to put in the new code is a bunch of different sets here of what a perimeter and a core area is, depending on if it's a qualified mixed use or other projects. And then they've also proposing different distances from the 2 streets, 75 feet in a couple spots and 125 around Claire's. So we want to talk about this. Are we all in favor of these particular numbers?
Generally, I think it's fine. The question that I had was, why not just do 125 all the way around? Give the project a bigger buffer away from the street side. That would be the 125 all the way around seems like not a huge.
Other comments?
I'm fine with it.
Go ahead.
TJ, how are you feeling?
I don't have a real issue with that, no.
Yeah, I'm okay with that as well.
Okay, yeah, I think I am. The 125, I think, was, the concept there is on the other side of that street, or at least farther away, or some residential areas, you want to buffer them a little bit more than you do the commercial areas that are on Capitola Road and 41st Street. So, okay, so we'll stick with, and everybody, what about the 85 feet for the hotel?
You know, if I could just and I hate to do this and kind of hijack the meeting, but I want to go backwards just a little bit. We're getting to some kind of specific areas where we haven't seen the objective design standards yet, which I'm really looking forward to. But, recently we had a town hall meeting with a couple council members and planning commissioners and had a pretty good showing, a lot of questions since that time. And I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding of our community out there. They're not here tonight, so it's hard to tell. But I think we just need a little, maybe some clarification on a lot of concerned partners here tonight. YIMBY has been here every time. We have, there's quite a few different YIMBY organizations out there, YIMBY Action, YIMBY Law, YIMBY, and I know Mr. Somfield, he brings some great input. My understanding, represents YIMBY Law. And YIMBY's done a lot of work in the background prior to getting to where we're at today, developing standards that holds us as planning commissioners and city accountable. And so we have those, and I appreciate YIMBY being here to make sure that we stay in line with that. We have our attorney that can help us do that as well. But it's a role that they play, and they've already had a big part in developing a standard that we're now held accountable to as we move forward. We have James here with Merlone Geyer, and I appreciate that. And, we've had a long relationship with Merlone Geyer now, coming really close, man. I wish we would have got there in 2019 of having something done, but that didn't happen. And, Merlone Geyer has 175 properties, I think, on the West Coast area that they do. This is their expertise. This is what they do. They purchase small projects. They've done quite a bit of housing. I know James is working on a San Rafael project they have up there. I looked at a Laguna Hills project they've done, and these are similar to what we're at, the situation we're at. There's some thought out there that maybe retail has gone away. It's at least changed, and we're going to leave that up to James and his group to make sure that they build the best property they can build on this piece of land that we have in Capitola, and it's changing us. But that comes back to where we're at, and kind of my role, and I think, and I know I don't want to preach to my colleagues here, but it's really to protect our community. And this is a pretty brilliant group up here. I'm just a simple retired firefighter, but we have finance people here, economic people, actual rocket scientists here. So we have some good people that are making decisions for the city, but there's a lot of concerns, I think. And listening to our community, I think it's important that we kind of go through this. And I don't want to get pigeonholed. I guess my concern about saying, okay, are we okay with 85 feet? Or are we okay with 125-foot perimeter? As we start going bit by bit down this process and we find ourselves pigeonholed into something that maybe we don't even know what the big plan is. I don't even know what Merlone Geyer is asking yet. We know what they've written on their letters to us, and I know they want to do a great development. I'm looking at the projects they've done throughout the West Coast. They're doing a great job doing that. But I guess for me, I'm still at the broader perspective until we get to these objective design standards. And I think I know my colleague here to the left of me has some concerns that I have, and that's really about how are we going to have this affect the city financially. If you look at we're having a town hall meeting tomorrow night. It's kind of going to go over our budget. It's not looking great for the city. And losing retail is a big part of that. Now, I think 227,000 is what I'm hearing, something like what the mall produced this last year outside of Target and stuff. But that 227,000 is revenue towards the city, even in the mall's current situation. And then we look at the amount of housing we're looking at. You're looking at, last time I heard, $785 per unit that it costs the city above and beyond the property tax. So we're looking at potentially of a couple $1 million shortfall here if we don't make good decisions in the process. And so my concern is, it's hard to make all of these agreements tonight, I think, is what I'm trying to say. For 85 feet, I don't have any issue with 85 feet based on what Merlone Geyer is going to bring, right? Are they going to bring us the retail that we think we need to help offset some of that? So for me, if that's what we want to do, if we want to go piece by piece, trying to say, are we okay with 85 feet? Or I would personally rather wait till we see all the design standards to make that decision. Or if Marlon Guy wants to throw a plan at us. But for us to, or for me, I feel uncomfortable making agreements to something that we don't even know what the real plan is. There's other parcels that could come in and ask for the same type of agreements as we move forward. Maybe they're smaller and they're on the outside of what Marlon Guy is doing. But I just wanted to share that with my colleagues and the group. And this really comes from concerns of hearing from our community. Is that, I don't know, are we looking, Katie, for like approvals for each of these pieces tonight in the amendments? Or is that something that we can tie in together at one time?
If you would like to see an updated draft at the next meeting with any amendments that you would like, such as the 125 around the whole periphery, that's helpful to us. But if you don't feel comfortable moving forward without the objective standards in front of you, that meeting's 2 weeks away, and we'll have those in front of you at that time. So
Well, I'll open it to my other commissioners, see how they feel about moving forward and piecemealing it.
Yeah, how do you all feel about not providing guidance to staff on, or providing some guidance on staff to the things we're looking at today relative to the ordinance that's proposed?
Yeah, you make sense, but I think the planning team needs guidance from us to move forward. So I have no problem saying, giving them the input they need to draft the objective standards. So I think we should go piece by piece and give that. They'll come back to us in 2 weeks with the final draft that we can vote on. I understand the fiscal impact to the city. There's a certain amount of this that's, in terms of finance, that you don't know, right? The mall is a disaster, candidly. So you keep the big revenue items, you keep Target, you keep Macy's, you keep Kohl's. The rest of it, is a little bit of money, but it's not enough. The question is does the per unit number drive us into the tank in terms of losses for the city, increased expenses for the city? So that's to be determined too. We don't know what any developer is going to deliver. So my inclination is let's give them guidance. 85 feet's fine, 125 or 75 setbacks are fine. Things like that, where they can come back to us with the final draft that we really have to dig into.
I can live with that. I can move forward with that.
Others?
I agree with Commissioner Howard. I understand what I think that in 2019, there was a completely different approach to this whole process where we met with Merlot Geyer and went through different, we want this, you want that. It was kind of a negotiation based on their proposal, and they had a design, which was nice. But, and I think it was easy to prescribe what the city interests based on, something tangible in front of us. But piecing this out seems awkward and strange. And, there's no tangible design in front of us to kind of say, we'll give you 2 of this if you give us 6 of that kind of thing. So, I think we're only left with piecing it together and then coming, hope isn't a strategy, but hoping for that.
Because I think it is this whole notion of what are they going to do, right? We sure would like a proposal that says, here's our plan, guys, and how do we draft around that? It's not forthcoming. We don't know if Malone Geyer does this or sells it, and off we go. So we have to put these proposals in place for the community, right? And that means whatever standards we put out, whoever builds it will be satisfied with. And I think the big question mark is, does it bury the city in negative financial impact? I don't know how you solve that.
I'll agree with Commissioner Howard right there. It's like, I understand there's a lot of variables that are unknown, but we're all sitting up here again because we care for the community and we have to give, advice and guidance to city staff, just so we could move forward on that.
Okay, so I guess we will try to do this in pieces. We've all seen projects that we're envisioning this mall will be, right? Santana Row is probably the classic one, right? That's kind of our model. We keep bringing it up, right? Now, is it Santana Row and Capitola going to bankrupt the city or not? We don't have a clue, right?
Well, wouldn't it, if Santana Row was in Capitola, I mean, just in terms of that specific model, the city would be doing better with that type of retail at being $300 a square foot, right? I mean, that's, I mean, hypothetically speaking. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to compare Silicon Valley with Capitola. But anyway, all right, so let's go back to where we were. Okay, I think we can skip, we're okay with your proposed setbacks. Let's talk about the qualifying mixed-use project, because this one does actually affect everybody in the city. And you can bring up the proposed rules for what is a qualifying mixed-use project.
The first item is the affordability aspect of 15% lower and then 5% mod. The lower would have to be deed restricted. The mod would either be deed restricted or limited to studio size. So
Okay, so the development meets affordable housing requirement. I think that one's pretty clear. Moderate income or a studio unit. I presume that we're okay saying studio units.
So that comes out of our general, out of our housing element. At the time that we passed it, our inclusionary housing ordinance has a 15% inclusionary requirement. And to build in more flexibility for the moderate income, that's up to 120 of AMI, area median income. We were advised to keep that a little more flexible in that it could either be deed restricted to a certain price that's affordable to anyone up to 120 of AMI, or just regulate that it's a studio, not a one bedroom, so that it's a smaller unit and would rent for less money.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Okay, hotel. Well, hotel is a controversy in the community. The staff is recommending 85 rooms and 3,500 plus square feet of meeting space. So it's not what you would call a convention center, but it's still has a fair amount of meeting capability in it. Any comments on that part?
I would say a minimum of 85 rooms. I see it says plus, so I guess we could put that there, but I think that is a minimum amount that we have. Aside from there, and I don't have a real opinion on the meeting space or not.
I would say that all over this entire county, there is a lack of anywhere we could host anyone more than 100, 150 to even 200, and we are an ideal location for that. So looking at the opportunity to host people, I mean, we're by the beach. You know, I've been to like 4 conferences this year, and they're all in Monterey or they're all somewhere else, but there's such a demand here. And if we build it right with the right amount of rooms for the hotel and the conference center, we could really be the hub. And what would that mean for our financial stability and health, right? So for 85 rooms to be minimum, I lean higher to be honest, like 150, right? And then if we're looking at square footage, what would accommodate that? If we're looking at 3,500 square feet, that's probably about 100 individuals right there. We're looking at 200, maybe 300. 10,000 to 15,000 square feet. Just from, again, that revenue capture standpoint of what TOT could bring into us. And it also has the enhanced benefit of less traffic versus if we were to do any other type of retail or any kind of housing.
Thank you.
I would agree on point for point.
And I would not agree. I think the hotel business is a challenging business. I'd defer to the developer, you know, in their desire to go and do the due diligence that would tell them what the hotel occupancy is, because there's all sorts of, you know, surveys done in that business, and the need for convention space or meeting space. I agree, and have been in a role where I've had to host large corporate events, and we always opt for Monterey. But we always opt for Monterey because they figured it out. They have great facilities, they have great functionality down there, and Santa Cruz County kind of missed it all the way through. La Bahia is sort of the best example, and that took us 30 years to figure out. So, but the mall site isn't a beach destination site. It's going to be more of a, I would assume, a business event type of site. And there's a formula in the hotel business. It's 103 rooms, business oriented, very low staffing because it's all about keeping the rooms full and keeping your costs low, and then your housekeeping staff. So I suspect that's what comes our way. It's a La Quinta, Marriott Suites, whatever it is, with medium-sized meeting area. So my inclination is to defer to the people that want to spend probably $30 million to build a hotel and then operate it. And let's see what they come back with. But 85 would be my minimum, 3,500 would be my minimums. You could probably talk me into a little bit bigger, but as a minimum standards, let's see what they come back with. Because there will be, if you go to Capitola Inn over there by the post office, you go to Marriott down the street on 41st, and a few other ones up and down the street, right? You would know pretty quickly what the average number of nights are, what average occupancy nights and average occupancy rates, and then the developer would be able to figure out where he wants to slip into that.
Yeah, so according to the city, at the Fairfield, which has 83 rooms and it's a 3-story thing, is 85% occupancy. So it's pretty good. They're doing pretty well all year
The
round.
developer might say, give us 150 rooms.
Right.
If we can get 85%, that'd
Be pretty good if you could do that. But I agree with Commissioner Howard. This is probably a business event thing, it's not a Comic-Con site, right?
See, James can tell you, he's got these projects going on right now. They have a couple of hotels. I think San Rafael's 2 hotels, Laguna Hills 2 hotels. They do this. It's profitable, and it's very profitable to us. I think minus a hotel. And when I was saying I wasn't too worried about conference space, I think we need conference space. I do think we could be the conference destination for Santa Cruz County. I know a lot of companies try to go to La Bahia, some of these, and they just don't have the room, the capacity, the parking. I think what Malone Geyer is developing here on this project for us allows that to become that property. Restaurants with the hotel, shopping, a little bit of nightlife. They can walk around, they can get on the transit, travel. It's really not that far to the beach. So I think at a minimum, we need a 185 room, 3,500 square feet. I'm negotiable on those. And this is the hard part about setting the standards. I mean, I'd like to say I trust Jameis and Malone Geyer, and we can just leave it up to you to come build us a great project. But at the same time, that revenue, the TOT, has got to come across and make up for the retail loss, and or if there's going to be retail loss there. So I'm pretty committed to a minimum of 85 plus rooms. I'd rather see it more towards 100, 125. But I think that's something we can talk about as we move forward with a plan that we have something to look at and know how do we negotiate that. Are they going to, for example, it says new commercial space maximum 25,000. For me, I'm saying 100,000 minimum. That's what I'm thinking right now. I don't see how we start less. You don't come back and ask for more later. I say we start at a minimum of 100,000 new commercial space, a hotel room, and ultimately it's going to end up in the city council and they can negotiate the final deal. But for me, I'm thinking a little bit higher in this process, and that's why it's hard to make a deal because we really don't know what they're asking for.
Well, but that's the point. We're not making a deal. What we're doing is trying to set code that developers can figure out how to navigate within. So
are we setting the code too low? That's what I'm getting.
But, yeah.
We're giving them thoughts of where we're looking.
I agree. But as it relates to retail, right? We're losing the mall, right? And if you walk up and down the mall, you'll see retailers that will not be in the new space, right? Because they won't pay the rents that the new facilities will demand.
That's where I trust the developer to figure out who to bring into the mall, right? I trust them. Right now, we're looking at 600 plus employees there, 80% occupied. I mean, they're doing okay for what they have. And that's where I trust Malone Geyer is in the business of making malls, developing these. So that's where I trust him to come up with the right tenants in those places. I think we need to make sure we don't set the bar too low for the city so that we set ourselves up to lose revenue in the
Well, I
process. That's
agree.
my concern.
And the 25,000 new square feet doesn't include an Ulta that stays, right, which is 8,000. That puts you at 30, yeah, so that's 35,000. And then there's some other space that's so I agree, there's some room there, but again, retail's tough. Retail's not,
With that retail business, I guess.
it's not a fun sport
Right.
right now, and so you have to sort of gauge with the Amazonification of our world what really would work there. And again, we've talked about these other developments. Drive up Stevens Creek in San Jose. You're going to go by Santana Row. You're going to go by a couple projects in Cupertino, and they're this formula, right? You're going to have a open space with your coffee shop and a couple of restaurants, and then housing built behind it, and however it works. And I think if I were to guess, there's one at San Antonio and El Camino. I think in Sunnyvale. I think maybe that's 50,000. I got a Safeway that screws the number up a little bit.
I don't think so. I think that one's smaller. I think it's probably on the order of 25.
Yeah.
It has one hotel that's, I would guess is about 85 rooms.
Again, the notion on this is to incentivize them to do the qualifying status, right? They want the 85 feet. These are the things that sort of, I think that's how this is what we're doing. You guys hit these numbers as a minimum, and you get these enhancements. So again, as much as it sounds, it would be great to say 100,000, super good quality tenants, attractive to everybody. I don't know if it works.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really great point right there. And as James brought up earlier, we have the Pacific Ocean to contend with, and we have that radius, right? So what kind of tenants are we really going to bring in this area? We're looking at what Capitola is right now and doing that fine dance of like, you know, keeping the DNA and the heritage, but what it can be in the future, all while still challenging with the financial health and the sustainability. Like, where are we going to be? What is 100,000 square feet of new commercial space equivalent to? Like, what kind of tenants can you bring in? What kind of sales capture or revenue can you capture versus a hotel conference area, right? There is a demand there and there's a lack. Everywhere I go, all these organizations I talk to across the entire county, or even businesses or employers that come in, they want space, right? And if we do capture that, right, what we could be as Capitola, right? Versus if we look at just retail and how much retail would it take to accommodate this same kind of revenue generation for the city.
Again, I think it's all thoughtful and good. At the same time, you want to attract capital to your city, right? If these guys are going to spend, or any developer is going to spend $300 million building or $400 million building, you have to make it sort of this symbiotic relationship. What's the minimum, and then what can you deliver? And again, you know, I don't know the math. The hard part is I don't know the math. They got to share with us what their math is, and until we get that, it's hard. But for us as a commission to recommend up to the council, I think we give the minimums. We say 25, 35,000 square feet of retail. Hopefully, it's more. 5,000. The city council can up those down as well. We can go at them and say we want to attract capital. You know, it's not every day firms come to our town and want to invest $400 million. In fact, it's never happened. Right? So how do we make it attractive and end up with an attractive project that doesn't break the city? So that's my bias is let's make these guys come to the city with their proposals and let our code stand on its own.
Just a reminder to please speak into the mic so you get picked up.
All right. Commissioner Christensen, you haven't said much.
I feel like setting the intention, like Commissioner Welkin, I think he was saying, with that, setting the intention where we want it, what we want, having that set and creating, even if we did create a higher minimum, it's at least showing what we want. And if they do come to the table with something tangible, we can, talk about it and have that type of negotiation. But my concern is, yes, attracting people, attracting developers is a concern, but at the same time, if the minimum is set at a low bar, that's what we're gonna get, and then it's our objective standard.
That's not true.
How is it not true, though? If they're
Because a
not,
developer's gonna come through town.
Oh, sure.
Hotels have multiple flags, right? Each flag kind of has a demographic, it has a radius, so it isn't competing with another, flag. So there's Hilton, Marriott, Hyatt, right? Those are the big three. And what they do is they do a very deep dive into the market, and they come back to the developer and they say, we can accommodate based on the demand, based on the number of rooftops that are moving in, based on how much competing conference space there is, how much demand we see, because this is their world, right? They're all in the business of making money and getting as many people to occupy their beds as possible, right? And so they're the ones who come in and say, we can accommodate 100 keys, or we could do 120 keys, or we can only do 85 keys. Like, it's not up to Merlot and Geyer. It's not up to the city. It's up to the flags. And it's true. If you set too high of a standard, then you'll disincentivize us from doing the higher density and doing the hotel. Like, the hotel can't be like, if it's too high of a standard and there's not enough demand for it, then it just doesn't happen. And so that's the way it works. Whenever we've gone and we've done a hotel deal, you're trying to capture the best hotel with the best flag, and they're going to put as many rooms as they can into the market that they think there's demand for. And they're not going to build one more just because they have alternatives of where they can go and do business. And they're just not going to build another room that they don't think will get occupied. So.
Okay, thank you. I think that helps, maybe. Okay, so I would propose that we leave the 3,500 the way it is as minimum. I would propose we up the minimum on the commercial, though, to 40, I would say 40,000, but I wouldn't go much above that. But I'll leave it up to you guys to chime in.
I could go with that. I can agree with
I like the new commercial space minimum. I would agree with that. I just hate the feeling of just leaving cards on the table right there. And just like, if we don't communicate what we want, we're going to get something potentially back that, even at what, let's say it was 85 is the only thing that could work, and we end up developing something like that. It doesn't work for the financial model, right? Then what?
It doesn't work. If it doesn't work for our financial model, it probably ain't going to work for a hotel developer, and they won't build it. So you sort of pick one. Either they're going to build it, and it's going to model out to work, and it would probably be 100 rooms versus 85, or you won't have a hotel at all. So my inclination is give them the minimums. Nobody builds to minimum. If they get to the minimum, they're going to say, well, why am I doing this? Why am I going to spend $30 million to build a minimum of 85 rooms and not make any money on it? They'll build more if there's a market for it. If there's not a market for it, they won't do the deal.
I'd like to buy a car from them, getting those minimums. But, we were looking back in 2019. I don't even know if it's even on the table anymore, but TJ Home Goods, you guys have them in some of your projects already. I think they may be moving out of your project in San Rafael, I'm not sure, but 30,000 square foot store. So if we're limiting ourselves by, we had an agreement at one time with Petco, TJ Home Goods at this mall. So right there, you're already at that space. So I say, why do we limit ourselves? If Marlon Geyer comes back and say, hey, listen, this is all we're able to get for you guys out there, then we can make those decisions. But I think telling them today 40,000 just gives them a lot of room to play. And the biggest thing that's changed since 2019 is this whole housing market, which Malone Guyers jumped in full bore with putting these homes and these units, housing units, to fill in some of that retail gap. And I get that, and that's what we're trying to do. But at the same time, there's got to be a place for, I know I'm not worried about James. He's going to take care of Malone Guyer. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm worried about Capitola and what are we going to do to get the right amount of retail? What retail can we get here? How big of a hotel can we get here? Can we bring in a conference room to make it more of a destination area? I don't want to put too much of a restriction on that process. I think by setting maximums out there, or, even if it's the best what we think we can get, at least it's throwing it out there, and then we can have that discussion later when they bring projects to and say, hey, we went out there and looked, we can only get you La Quinta with 50 rooms. Okay, then we can have that discussion. But what we do know is La Quinta with 50 rooms isn't going to make up for the retail we've lost. We're going to be a deficit day one. So it puts us in a position to have I think a more appropriate discussion on the finances and how we do that. And I trust Malone Guyer to do their job. Yimmy's going to do their job. I just think we need to set some goals out there that we can try to reach. And maybe they're just goals. Maybe they're not obtainable. Maybe the city can't get there and Malone Guyer can't get there and it's not a doable project. But at least we're not underestimating what that goal is. That's only my concern.
I agree. I think it's setting the intention, setting the bar, and then at which time they bring a project in.
But that's not the way it works.
But
We're giving them objective standards to say,
these are,
if you say 150 rooms, they say, well, the market doesn't support 150 rooms. What do you want us to do? Is the city then going to go back and
that's when they,
can we do that?
they haven't even told us they're going to build a hotel yet.
They would then have the option to do a housing-only application. So, like, to keep in mind that the standards are set up to incentivize them to build a mixed-use project. But what else could they do? They could build under those other standards and do a housing project. So, housing only.
Housing only, that's my concern.
Or mixed use without a hotel, or a hotel with less rooms. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's, I was going to bring that up. We don't want to disincentivize them because they have the other option, and we don't want just houses only on the mall, unfortunately. So it's catch-22. Okay, so
we're not, we're just advising, right? We're not voting.
we're not really,
yeah, tonight is advising. So we won't be voting until we actually have an updated draft. But it can be it'd be nice to see if there is a majority that's in support of one idea for us to come back to return with.
well, I think we're agreeing on 3,500. Are we? Sort of, okay. The retail, the commercial space is the one I think. Oh, yeah, these are minimums.
Minimum of 85,
Yeah, these are minimums, definitely.
and then minimum of 35?
Mhm. And the question is on the commercial retail number, what do we want? I mean, I think 40,000 is going to kind of work. If you look at what we've got now, and if you do the math on it, the mall is very inefficiently designed. It's massive corridors which aren't really used that well. On this design, those don't count because they'll be outdoors. There's no indoor component. So when we give them a number, that's actually true store area. Right now, they've got 180,000 square feet of what is defined as retail, but by my count, about half of it is not usable space. It's just empty. It's the corridors where they got the guys making keys and stuff like that, and the food courtyard, which is also very inefficient from a delivery standpoint. So, in reality, they probably have about 70,000 square feet of true stores. My guess. Anyway, that's why I thought they cut that in half because some of these stores won't. I mean, Ulta will probably stay here, but the mix of stores has changed over time. It's going to be different. That's why I came up with 40,000.
Does that include the Halloween storage Sears retail space?
No, you mean the guys occupying the Sears building?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, so I think, so that's where I go back to. Sears has not been rented out. We had a deal one time where we were looking at some pretty good tenants, right? And we didn't get there, and maybe they can't get there in the future. I don't know. I just hate to limit them on that. Right now, that's the Halloween thing for the few months that it's there is a good good run for them, but I just hate to limit that amount of retail space.
The way, if you do just some visual math, right, you have 40,000 square feet and assume a store is 1,000. A small store would be 1,000 feet, medium 2,000, so 2,000 square foot Starbucks or whatever they are, that's 20 stores. And you think the way they're going to do this is around some sort of open space, community gathering area. And then I go look at the functionality of the ones in San Antonio and El Camino or Stevens Creek and Wolf Road or whatever, and they're about that. They're 15 stores. There's somewhere in that neighborhood. So I think 40 is fine. Maybe a little harder to fill. Good minimum to start.
I mean, even the one, honestly, at San Antonio, which is actually a pretty good design. When I was there last week with some clients, I think there are 3 or 4 empty spots. They just can't lease them. I don't know why.
That's a high density market there.
Really, yeah, it's a great market. Lots of businesses right. I don't get that one.
I think it's also a little different market because we talk about the Pacific Ocean, but we also have this mountain range between us and the metropolitan area over the hill, and we're a captured market over here. And I think, the people will stay here if we provide them, I think, the opportunities and not drive over the hill. And so I think, I keep going back to TJ Home Goods because that's what was mentioned. And their average store is 30,000 square feet. So their revenue is very high. So we can talk about 40 stores, or we can talk about one big store and 10 little stores.
But the demographics are just different. The spend rate in this town, and I know from experience, my family's business and other businesses, that it's not San Jose. I mean, you open a store in Palo Alto, you open a store in Cupertino, you open a store in Capitola, and it's a third or a half of what they're going to do over the hill. So he's got to factor that in as what a developer's going to get for his rents, what we're going to see in terms of potential tenants, and you say it's just softer. As much as I'd like to say we can get a lot of terrific tenants, it's a harder sell. And you walk Pacific Avenue, you walk the rest of 41st, there's a lot of empty space, and new is easier, right? You get a brand new space, right? 1,000 new tenants or 3,000 new tenants. That gets interesting, I think. But we as an advisory board to the council has to say, there's a minimum, 25, 40, I think that's sort of whatever it is. We think that could be a successful retail platform, the open space and apartments. And again, this is about incenting them to do this, because if they come back and say, well, we don't want to do a hotel, that's not going to work because you guys want 150 rooms and you want 50,000 square feet of retail, that's not going to work. They can just come back and say, we're doing all housing. And, oh, by the way, we want the accelerator, the extra. All of a sudden, you got yourself 2,000 apartments and no retail. So there's this balancing act that I think we got to play. So I think 40's fine.
I agree. 40's fine. I'm just taking into consideration, we're building something for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Demographics will change. I mean, we've seen the cycles over time. Like, there was a time when this area was bustling. Like, this was the it spot. Everyone in the county came down here. Like, who's to say in the next 10 years, as things change, it will not return to that. So how do we prepare for that, right?
How many times have you, driving over the hill to go to the Apple store, say, or that's what I'm saying. It's just driving over the hill to go shopping for a pair of boots, or if you need a dress for a wedding. There is no place in this town to find anything. And if we want to capture any of those dollars and any of that and build on that commerce, I just feel like setting this intention is important for our community.
No disagreement there, but from a code standpoint, do we want to over-specify how much? Put a large number on how much retail we need in order to get over this bar to allow them to go, 85 feet, which is really what they want. I mean, that's what I'm worried about, is over-specifying.
Yeah.
Are you okay with 40?
It's a majority group here. That's where you guys are. I'm worried about under-specifying, and that's, I know we've been down this road with Merlone Geyer. It's a negotiable process, They're not going to come say, we don't like your deal, it's off the table, they're going to do what's best in their interest as well. It's a negotiable process. So I just hate to set the standard too low. That's my concern.
Okay, well, by the way, this
Move forward, let's go with your 40,000.
this process is going to go for another 2 months, maybe 3 months, actually. So we do have some time, I think. Okay, so let's go with those numbers then. All right, the next item, lost in my spreadsheet.
You can move forward on the slides and help you.
Yeah, go ahead. That's the next slide.
Okay, this is just the affordable component. I don't think there's much. This is setting the minimum at the housing element numbers.
I think it's really what is table 1724-6, which talks about the development standards, that one there. Yeah.
So
Are we going to talk specifically about separating affordable housing from the project, or is that?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up after we get through this table. I think that's a good one to debate.
Okay. Open space is another one that 2.5% within the site area if you go up to 85 feet, and 5% with other residential mixed-use projects. So just giving them a little more flexibility there.
How many acres is 2.5%? Is that an acre?
So I believe with the 20-acre site, you're looking at about a half an acre. Is that right?
Sorry, Ryan had some numbers, right? Is he still?
I believe it's about at 20 acres, if it's the 20-acre Merlone-Geyer redevelopment site, it's about a half acre of public open space. And this is the open space that is available to anyone. It's not, with a residential component, there'll be specific open space requirements, but this is the open space that's generally open to everyone, so.
Yeah, and you're right. It's half an acre by the means of that requirement.
I got nothing.
I'm good.
That's fine. Maybe, is there, I mean, I don't know how it would impact the project. You just said they're both 5% and that's an acre.
Yeah.
But I don't know the math in terms of how that would impact the unit count and that kind of stuff.
Can I ask a quick question for clarification? In terms of dividing up that parcel with open space, I mean, for everybody, we're talking sidewalk, like if you're gonna slice that big, mass 4 ways, say, and make it like a square, is that open space counting sidewalks and any of that kind of stuff, or no?
Ben, can you elaborate on that?
So the open space requirement would include, and Ryan, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, on your assumptions, it would include publicly accessible open space like parks and plazas and other usable space like that, but it also would include landscaped areas that was included within the streetscape design.
Yeah, one way, and we can kind of tighten up the definition on how we define it. But like say you have a building that's forms a plaza on the square. I usually include any sidewalk that's directly adjacent. That's really part of that space. So like so that to that extent, the sidewalk is counted if it is contiguous with the plaza or town square. When you have just a sidewalk on a street where there's a sidewalk on 70-foot right of way, 2 15-foot sidewalks, they're really just a means to facilitate circulation and not so much place making in a major event, then I don't count those typically. So it has to be associated with kind of a public space event, either town square or a corner plaza or something that's kind of significant.
Not general circulation.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But you want to include and you want to encourage, those plaza spaces need to have great landscape, a variety of seating, lots, good shade, trees, maybe a stage, audio systems. Like there's a lot of things that help make them a very rich attraction. And so there are sometimes standards that say you can't count this or you can't count that. Generally, I like to count the perimeter of the space and everything inside it, as part of its composition. So it counts.
And that will be one piece of the objective design standards is more detail on what's required for publicly accessible open space, including the requirement for at least one space that's of sufficient size to function as that central community gathering place.
I think that 2.5 is fairly low, but I just want to make that comment. I'm not exactly going to make any suggestions otherwise, unless there's some guidance. 2.5 just seems very low for such a large development.
I just don't know what it looks like, so it's hard to say. I tend to think that 5% of the site is fine. Again, we're trying to incent them for the 85 feet to do these other things. It is right now we're just negotiating against ourselves. I don't know. So 2.5 is fine. I can be fine with that. 5 would be better, but
I think 2.5 for the function of what it's using is an incentive basically to go down this qualified mixed use project. I'm fine with that.
And maybe we can just 2.5% outside of sidewalks or something, so there's like true, we're gonna have setbacks, some open space, little park areas. A lot of these type of malls that I see Merlot Guy are doing have, like a little park area, a little open areas that would be a specific, and a half acre is not unreasonable.
yeah. I think of the Santana Row fake grass kid area.
Yeah, it's a little different concept, and
Yeah, and I that's probably happening. That's kind of the
So just for reference, actually the Park Valencia, which is I believe that's what you're referring to. It's the corner plaza where two sides of the plaza shops, and then there's kind of the green and then the pavilion retail. That's about a 21,000 square foot space, which is a little less than half an acre. And so part of it, I think, depends on the programming of the space. If you have, something that is retail oriented, you really actually don't want them to be too big. They need to be kind of a certain size that all the shops feel connected. You can make the circuit around the shops. But I guess the other point of flexibility we have here is that we can have a minimum size for the prime gathering space and say that's maybe 20,000 square feet. But then the rest of the requirement has to be picked up somewhere else on the site. So there could be more than one event, basically, in terms of public open space.
I do like that.
I'm just imagining kind of like the New Leaf in Aptos, when the new village that went in, the huge lawn that's in front, the thing's packed with families and people it's just made it such a nicer housing area, plus ice cream and anywho.
Okay, so we settle on the 2.5%?
Yeah.
All right, so parking. So our standards will be 500 square foot unit or less is 1, 500 to 750 is 1.5, and 750 plus is 2. That's what we would have in 1776. Malone Geyer was suggesting smaller numbers, but not by much.
We can pull those up. We have a slide.
Do you have a slide on them, or I can just read it?
0.8 for studios,
Yeah, it's 0.8 for studio. Yeah, there you go.
It's just math. I don't know which math number is bigger or smaller without having an idea.
Except this one's more clear.
Yeah, it is more clear. But is it, again, we talked about this last time, how if they want to build an apartment complex with no parking, that's good luck in renting it, right? That's going to be your problem. Again, I suspect that the developer has an idea that studios get one, and so I'm not disinclined to do that. I just don't know how different ours is, and if ours is close enough, I'm good with it. But I have no way of measuring the delta between ours and theirs. Kay, do you have any insight?
I was just going to say, if you were to go this route, you could just put it in the qualifying projects. So it's another incentive to get a qualifying project with a hotel and commercial.
Right, that's what I was going to
Is that where you're headed?
That's perfect.
And then in terms of square footage matching up, 750, if it's greater than 750 in our code, it requires 2 spaces. There's definitely 2 bedrooms out there that would be 750 square feet. So,
Yeah, my concern is setting a standard that is thought throughout the city. We just saw this with, and unfortunately, even if they don't have parking, they still come. You can look at the Bluff. So they have 26 parking spots for 36 rooms, I think, not including the electric and handicapped, and it's sold out. So I think we just need Capitola, maybe not so much on that mall property, but outside of that, parking is at a premium. And I think we've been fighting this. We used to have a traffic and parking commission, right, just because of that. So I think I'm okay with some leniency, but how much leniency do we keep giving for something we don't know what we're going to get in return? And I think we have a standard parking area, and if it's something that we need to change later, then maybe we can look at it. But
Would this be a good segue to, like the metro type of discussion where you're saying, having emphasis on developing a really robust metro station on, an advantageous area of the parcel in lieu of granting decreased parking? With the incentivized qualification package? I don't know.
and maybe we do something specific for the affordable housing that's more in this line and the units.
it's definitely the site that's closest to our transit center. So having the transit center right there, so that is a good offset for the decrease in parking. The parking is very expensive, so I think it is a large incentivizer to decrease the parking on that site.
So maybe the solution is for the qualifying, you take their numbers.
For the qualifying. I don't know, it might be helpful, Jameis, if you could talk about with the mix of mixed use and how do you do the overall parking, the commercial, and then if you're reducing your numbers here, do you allow the residents to park in the commercial sites when needed? How do you
Usually residents in these buildings, they want to be in a secure parking structure. They don't want to go hunt for a parking stall in a shared lot with retailers. So again, our lenders, our investors, there's a lot of scrutiny in how much parking is being provided. It can't be too little, it can't be too much. Too much doesn't pencil, too little, you don't get renewal tenants because the word gets out like, oh, this is the worst building to live in. There's like the parking's terrible and I have to go park on the street, I have to park down the street and I'm walking, a couple blocks or whatever. Like if there's any place where like economics like really play out, supply demand, it's in parking models. And so this is just a reflection of what we see boots on the ground.
Specifically for the multifamily, not
Yeah, this is only related to multifamily.
what would you normally ask for in terms of parking spaces for
For a retail center, the standard for 820 shopping center ITE, which is the International Traffic Code, is 4.5 stalls per 1,000. That's skewing more towards 4 stalls per 1,000 on a blended basis for a shopping center because you park once and you do multiple things, right? If you're just standalone, like a restaurant, you just had like a restaurant pad by itself, it could be 10 or 15 stalls per 1,000 square feet because the quantity, like the velocity is so much higher. But in a mixed use project, there are also models for shared parking because there's some uses that are using it in the mornings, other in the evenings. It really depends. on the mix of uses. So this is specifically looking at the residential because on the site already, when you have leases that are going to remain in place, there are already parking requirements that we have to comply with. Even if the city said you can park less, like I wouldn't be able to because our agreement with Macy's and Target and Ross and everybody else says there has to be a certain amount across the site for retail.
Katie, is this recommendation only related to the residential housing piece?
Yes. Yeah.
James, quick question around there. So a little out of left field, right? So when it comes to parking is expensive to build in general.
Structured parking, yeah.
Structured parking. Over in Asia, where space is a premium, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have those kind of like parking stack escalator things that kind of, is that a viable solution or a model? Has it been explored?
In some places in like very urban markets, we've looked at that and there are solutions that are working where you have like lifts. So you'll have like a 20-foot clear on the inside. A lot of times it's specialized where like a building is built into a grade where there's like major grade change between where your base level is and it's moving up a hill. And so you have a large kind of initial level, then you can build a lift in there. It's also just like, it's challenging to get adoption from tenants just because it can.
It's a behavior change.
It's a behavior change and there's a structural component to it. And again, like people, same thing. We have concerns a lot of times with like structured parking for like a grocery store. Like Target's even told us here, like they don't like their parking structure. They prefer for it to just be a prototype where it was surface parked because all their competitors, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, everybody else, it's just surface parked, right? And the same kind of goes for like a lift type of an operation. If someone can rent somewhere else where they don't have to worry about that, then they will.
Yeah, but in an area where like parking is a premium, especially in a small jurisdiction like ourselves, I mean, is it financially more sustainable? Like, is it cheaper to do that versus just service parking or structured parking?
No, because you'd have to build like a bigger structure to clear the height that you need for those lifts. So it hasn't proven out to be more financially, or you would see it, right? You'd see it throughout the region. There's been thousands and thousands of multifamily units built over the last 10 years. And I don't know of a project that's using lifts, in this market. Downtown San Francisco, perhaps, in the very urban areas, but not in the suburban areas. The rents just don't offset the cost.
Okay, I think we've concluded on that one. Let's go back to the table again. Is there anything else?
So is the direction here to include this as a?
Include this for qualifying, yeah. But not the other one, the other column, yeah, the right-hand column would stay as required by 1776.
Okay, the next one would be, well, there's no decision to be made on the 20 dwelling units per acre. Is there, as a minimum, is there support for the maximum 48 dwelling units per acre? And this is in alignment with the housing element.
Yeah, and it gets you a huge number anyway, right? They wanted to do the maximum, very large. I'm fine with that.
Setbacks?
That will be specified in the objective design standards, so you'll see that next time.
Delay that conversation.
I think the next thing to discuss, we could go to the affordable housing mix. If you
Yeah,
like. And then the other one is permitted rights, so permitted uses. With us moving towards a hotel has historically been a conditional use permit, certain retail beyond a certain square footage, conditional use permit, and us moving those, that's something like highly desired by the city. So putting that into the allowed uses. Whichever one you'd like to take up first, Jared.
Let's do the allowed uses. That might be easier. I don't know if we even have anything on that.
So hotel, retail, personal services, restaurants, and then we put in cultural institutions because of the children's museum that's on the mall site and is beloved. So if, just if that would also be an allowed use.
Could you define personal services again, what that would be specifically?
Yeah, that's like a hair salon, a nail studio. It's a place in which you're a dry cleaner where you're getting a personal service. You're not buying something at retail, but it's a service.
Katie, what's not on there that are we missing something that should be on there or discuss
That's
something?
a very good question.
They're excluding bars, right? I'm trying to find the language.
Oh, with the restaurants, we definitely prohibited, we didn't include bars or entertainment.
Yeah.
And anything that would be like a really late night, loud, that would need a CUP.
Same with like if they decided to put in a, I don't know, something that the public could use, like hypothetically a skate park or something like that, or something that was something that everybody could go to at some point, like a destination type of situation, would not be part of, that would require a CUP if that was
I would have to go back and look at
laser
our.
tag. I don't know.
I don't think I'm not sure if we call out skate park specifically, but
the first thing that
yeah, but that
came
does
to mind
make,
were lots of kids
or
come to.
pickleball,
Yeah, pickleball.
things that make noise. So, I would have to go back to our code and look at how parks are reviewed.
I'm fine with
Yeah.
Something about personal services calls out to me, I'm sorry. Just from the fact that when I used to have to approve business license online, we're not short on any personal services, and typically what the attrition rate on those type of businesses are. Just seeing how they function in a retail space hasn't been successful, so I'm,
So you would want them to have a CUP?
yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they're not a great like economic development driver in terms of return to the for retail taxes and sales, but they do draw people in to get their nails done, that type of thing. Or but oftentimes in terms of another personal service is a gym, and a gym will one of the largest issues we have on 41st Avenue and re-tenanting a spot is due to a yoga studio next door that do the class sizes and the amount of parking associated with that. It kind of tips the scale. So personal services could either be included or not. Sometimes I think that's sometimes if it's in the instance of a gym, it'd be good to have some type of parking analysis tied to that, not knowing what the impact would be on overall parking. But.
I can buy that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a
Recording in progress.
Okay, we all good with taking out personal services then, but the other, leaving the rest? Okay.
One note, I heard from Ryan that he's having trouble hearing commissioners when they're speaking. So if you could speak in the microphone, that would be great.
Okay.
Clarification is sorry, if I could just double back just real fast. The cultural institutions, are those churches? Are they going to be like any type of religious congregation? Is that a definition?
No, I think that's handled separately. It's things like libraries, museums,
Okay,
similar type.
perfect. Thank you.
And would you like to talk about affordable housing?
Yes, yeah. And what have you got on that?
So we don't have anything in our code currently about preferences of distributing affordable housing throughout a development, or we allow when you're under the IHO, the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance, for a developer to dedicate land, so to build affordable housing as a standalone project on dedicated land. And that was really put in place to allow, say, a mid-pen to come in and develop out a site with 100% affordable housing. So with that, I think the question here is, do you want to continue with that flexibility? That's flexible the way it's set up, or do you think within the objective standards there should be a mix, Right now, we don't require a mix, or we don't require, if you wanted to go the other way, of requiring standalone and no mix, so.
I personally prefer the mix, with the exception if we're going to do maybe like a senior housing specific site, like we have on Bay, and our demographics definitely warrant us having a senior housing specific for the affordable housing. And I think it allows, in that area, which is great, it's what we identified initially in our general plan and housing element was an area that's transit oriented, had the amenities to support our seniors. So for me personally, I would prefer it to be a mixed use unless we're going to make it specifically for a identified group like seniors.
And I think allowing the flexibility, so today we have no demand for it being other than mixed, or if they came back with a dedicated building because of the ability to get a tax credit or get incentives or
Subsidies.
and type to partner with them. So I think leave it flexible, but I would, if they came back with a plan that said we need one building because we're going to commit to a relationship with a low to moderate income developer, that should be available to them as well. So I say leave it open as it is now and see what they come back with.
I guess maybe somebody can explain the language that Merlongeyer put in their letter on 3C that talks about this. They seem to be favored the standalone, and I think the reason was because it makes it easier. You got one relatively simple project. I go figure out how to get the grants and everything, the financing.
Yeah, exactly. The financing is different altogether for
Right.
low-income building versus the project. So they could just bifurcate the two projects.
I wasn't aware of the flexibility that exists. I was just responding to this code, but having the flexibility is ideal because of the reasons that I mentioned in my comments earlier about financing affordable. If it is a large affordable, like a large number of units, a lot of times you get actually even more units through a dedicated affordable building, and you can target deeper levels of affordability, but it also just results in like a more cohesive project. What we've found in the large multifamily units, when they're like affordable units spread throughout, a lot of times those units, like those individuals, they kind of get lost, and they don't get the benefit of the nonprofit who's a partner in the affordable building. So, but it depends on the size of the project and everything. So the flexibility, I think, is great because it allows us to do either or. I just didn't know that existed, so.
Okay.
Sounds like flexibility is a good thing.
Yeah. What else do we have then for tonight?
We'll go through the slides and just make sure we don't miss anything. The fiscal impact analysis.
Yeah, so Yimby was suggesting changing the language because we kind of imply it's a factor in approving
Why?
project.
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, that's,
I was listening to what she was saying, and yes, we can't make decisions based on this financial impact analysis, but it's giving, it's giving context to the development, and then it gives, leeway into the negotiation that could come from that. So it's going to sink the city, ahead of time. That's funded by the developer. We can then respond with a negotiation. I mean, am I kind of around that's the road it would take?
So, yeah, it'll be a great informational tool to the city to understand the economics, not only just the incremental economics of the project, but also the greater impact for the.
right,
And from that, it might, if it's not a profitable project for the city, we could start thinking of other ways in which, what else can the city do in order, to protect ourselves, and not maybe directly with the developer, but in terms of a more holistic approach to our economic development as a whole.
And I think that's why the the wording in the version that you have before you has it to be considered in connection with the approval. It specifically doesn't say that it's a basis to deny, but I think that we are disinclined to recommend YIMBY's change there because even if you don't use it as a basis for denial, it still should consider the decision making. It could be the basis for a condition of approval as long as that doesn't make the project infeasible. So there are ways to consider that information without it violating the Housing Accountability Act.
Okay.
Yeah, personally, I think it's fiscally responsible on our part to do our due diligence and see what the outcome is. And then if we, at that point, we could have to make some type of conditions or changes. I understand YIMBY's position, but it doesn't take away, I think, our responsibility to do the due diligence for the city on that path.
Yeah, my concern was the specific language on 3D here. In my world of engineering, you use the word shall, and in engineering project, if you use the word shall, that means you have to do something in this information. You have to approve it or don't disapprove it. If you could soften the word to something that's, I'd be more, you're the lawyer, not me. But I'm just saying, my experience is you put shall in there, you got to do it. That's like, the state may not like that.
Well, I agree that shall is mandatory, though I'm not sure which. I want to make sure I see the language.
Well, you
The
say
city
shall
shall
consider
consider the findings, and so that
when
that is-
reviewing and acting on, right?
that's correct. Though it doesn't. Again, it doesn't say that there's a
Approve.
that there's a basis to deny based on the results, but it is directive so that the city shall consider the results so that it's making an informed final action on the project.
I mean, I'll leave it up to you. I'm just,
Yeah,
it's fine, it's okay.
the way I look at this is almost like a public service. You're gonna get the financial analysis. You're gonna disseminate it around the community, and it is what it is. If it's negative, there'll be an uproar at their poor public public meeting. But there's not much else you're gonna do with this thing. So
I think with Commissioner, my God, I'm sorry. Welch was saying, it's late. Our due diligence in it's not about putting up barriers, right? But it's a public tool for transparency for the community. And I just want to tighten up that language of having what's included, what must be included in that financial impact analysis. Again, it's like the long-term city service costs, revenue projections by the use type and the type of assumptions that we're using. Those are very key variables that if anyone were to go over that report, I think should be included in there. Yeah, I can send it.
Yeah, and we have our economist who prepares these
Right.
studies, and he can advise on how to tighten that language up as well.
If that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. I want to make sure we get everything.
And last item is just the requirement that they host their own public meeting before bringing it to, in order to be considered a complete application. I think that's the last. There's support for that. We heard support for that at the last meeting, but just double checking.
I didn't understand Yimby's comments about the timing on all of that.
So we'll have it as one of the items that has to be included in your application for completeness. And I think that was the concern is how we didn't state that within the code, but that's the way in which to handle that.
Yeah, the comment is correct that under the Permit Streamlining Act, if it's not on your application checklist, it can't then be a basis to find the application incomplete. But in our view, the code, if the code were to be adopted with this language, that then provides the direction to update the checklist to reflect that code requirement.
Okay, so it's not the 10 days associated with the going through that process. It's a concern.
Correct, because it would be something that would happen before the submittal, or if it wasn't done before the submittal, if it's on the checklist, then that becomes a basis to find the submittal incomplete until they've they've completed it.
Okay, that's pretty. Okay. Anything else?
Sure, yeah, so I think the next thing we should discuss is next steps and timing. So for the December 4th meeting, we'll have the objective standards and we'll update the code as with the direction we were given today. Following that, there's a city council meeting on December 11th, and I think it's not realistic that we would take the planning commission's recommendation from the December 4th meeting to a city council meeting. So I think the expectation would be a hearing in January. We're also like going to be sharing with you for the first time the objective standards. So I also think it's realistic that you'll have edits for us before giving a recommendation to city council, as you did tonight. So I think more realistically, December 4th, you would kind of go through the same exercise we did tonight, that you'd give us comments. And then we would return to you, I think it's the third Thursday. It's like, I want to say January 15th, in January, with an updated objective standards, updated code, all the pieces, and then ask for a recommendation on to city council, and then proceed with hearings to city council after that. So we have put in our notice, we've done all the noticing for the 4th. Should you think that our work is perfect and could move forward to city council, you could make a decision on the 4th. It's been noticed for that, but otherwise you would continue it to the meeting in January.
Okay. That sounds like a good plan. I highly doubt we'll get it all done on the 4th. Presumably there are a lot of things in this objective standards, right? To consider. So, okay, that's good. With that, is there anything else on the director's report we want to talk about tonight?
Just in the spirit of Thanksgiving, I want to thank you all for all your time that you spend, endless hours, on these very important decisions for the residents of Capitola. So thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we're adjourned until December 4th at 6 o'clock.